baby one. Yeah, that's it. That'll do. Okay, that's it. Ritual done. Okay, Rachel. Okay. All right, I'll leave it. Sorry. Okay. Are we on though? Who's my audio person? Who's doing audio? Let's see. Audio video. Huh? Yeah, that's on now, I think. Yes. All right. Here we go. That's the way it is. Like that? Is that it? Okay, that's it. All right. Okay, people. We're bouncy here. I have to be careful. Yeah. Let's take that away. That's it. Yeah. I can't move back, can I? No. Not really. Okay. Maybe an inch. Yeah. No inch. Okay, I'll be right. Okay. That's it. Okay, I'm ready. I think it's been at least 4 years since I've been here, isn't it? It is. It's 4 years since I've been here. Are you sure?
Yes.
I was really here 2 years ago.
2.5. Yes.
2.5. Yeah. 2.5. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm glad to be back. Okay. Okay. Well, I'll just sing one more little prayer. No, I'm okay. So I'll sing one more little prayer. But it's meaning. The first two lines are anybody in the room who already kind of identifies with being a Buddhist. It's reminding us of our reliance on the Buddha, his teachings, and so on and so forth. Those of us who've chosen, let's say. But the second two lines can be for all of us. It's really expressing like an altruistic kind of purpose. Why are we here together? What's the point of being here? Why are we here? Well, we're going to listen. That's the idea. Me too. I'm serious. I'm going to be listening as well to these ideas coming from the Buddha about life, generally, about life, happiness, suffering, these things. And why? To find tools, that's the point, to listen to it for some tools to help us in the most basic way of putting it, this is the whole Buddha's idea, which we're going to talk about, is that we've all got this incredible potential. Nothing fancy, but potential to be less neurotic, less fearful, less depressed, less anxious, less angry, blah, blah, stuff that we're utterly familiar with. And this is the whole Buddha's point, He says this stuff is not the core of our being. We can not only lessen it, but in the long term we can get rid of it, which is a very weird idea in our modern world. Not only that, but we listen for the tools to help us use these tools to help us do that, but also to develop the other part of ourselves, to grow the kindness, the compassion, the generosity, the love, the intelligence, the wisdom, the contentment. These qualities, this is Buddha's view, we're going to talk about. This stuff's at the core of our being. This is who we really are, I mean, this stuff seems like a pretty simple concept, but that's the essence of the Buddhist approach. The essence of, therefore, the Buddhist methodology, the Buddhist techniques. The purpose of the person being a Buddhist is to help us get rid of, lessen the rubbish and grow the goodness. I mean, bottom line, Just think in that way. Listen for tools to help us do that. This prayer kind of expresses that. Oh no, well, the point of that is it's going to be for our own sake, but also because we live in this crazy world together, it's for the sake of others as well. That's the idea. Sangye chodam soke choknam la jamchu baru dagi kyap suchi dagi chunyen gipe sonam ki drola penchis sangye drupa shok sangye chodam soke choknam la jamchu baru dagi kyap suchi Dagi chunyen gi personam ki, drola penchir, sange drupasho, sange chunam, soke choknam la, chancho baru dagni kyapsuchi, dagi chunyen gi personam ki, drola penchir, sange drupasho. So I think happiness was in the title today, wasn't it? Was the word happiness in the title?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So what's that got to do with it? Think about it. Well, let's just look at that. So that in one way, you know, you can say the whole Buddhist approach. Like I said, one way of saying what Buddhism is a methods for helping us understand our own mind, which means to lessen all the rubbish in there and to grow all the goodness. So the obvious question is, you should ask, well, why would I want to do that? Why would I want to be less anxious? Why do I want to be less angry? Why do I want to be more kind, more wise? Well, one way of saying it is so obvious is because we know, check the last time you were angry, depressed, anxious, jealous. You know, it's obvious because it's miserable. It's completely miserable. It's clearly clear. It's the opposite to happiness. And then look when things are going harmoniously and relatively well in the family, in the work, in the wherever, and people are being kind to each other, and there's generosity, and people laugh at jokes. Well, guess what? That's called happiness. I mean, it's not rocket science, you know. So really, actually, one way then of framing all of Buddha's advice, all of Buddha's teachings, all this, you know, Buddhist view of the world, right down to basics, is a method for getting happier and a method for getting less suffering. And therefore, of course, when you learn that, you can be of use to others, it's obvious, and you can help them do the same. So if that's true, then the obvious question has to be, well, what is happiness? How would you define it, you know? But, so I think if we asked each one of us in this room, the first thing we would do, because this is completely normal, what we would do is we would describe an event or a thing or a person that in our mind, as far as we're concerned, is the cause of happiness. Equally, if I asked you about suffering, you would describe the exact same thing, a person, a thing, an event. And this is one of the fundamental points that Buddha disagrees with. Not 100%, but he says we're missing the crucial thing, and this implies the essence of the whole approach in Buddhism. The Buddhist deal, the Buddhist point, and this is that actually what goes on in our mind is the key thing, not the outside world. It's true if your husband's mean to you, you know, that is a cause of, you can say that the Buddhist way of putting it, I mean, that triggers an unhappy feeling. It's definitely true. But as far as we are concerned, and this is not splitting hairs, this is really a very powerful point. And on this, in a way, this one topic is what we're going to be speaking about in various ways throughout the week, you know. Because this is the essence of the Buddhist approach. And it's not kind of a religious or moralistic point. All the Buddha is saying is the mind, the key to the sources of happiness, the sources of suffering, mainly, most, primarily, are coming from the mind. And what he means by that is nothing mysterious, but the way we see things, how we interpret things. That's the way to say it. But I think if every single being we ask on this planet, if you look at the monkeys and the dogs and their behaviour, we can deduce that actually we believe the outside world is the cause of suffering. We totally believe the outside world is the cause of happiness. Don't hear it as moralistic. Don't hear it as like naughty or like, you know, sort of like holy or something. Oh, you shouldn't have nice ice cream. I'm not allowed to have a nice husband. Please, go for it. Nothing wrong. That's not the issue. It's not moralistic. It's practical. So the Buddha's idea was a saying. If you can change something, please change it. But what if you can't? And let's look at our lives. If we really do believe that getting chocolate ice cream instead of vanilla is what you prefer to make you happy, and you can suddenly get the chocolate if you can, then please go for it, get the chocolate. If you can ask your husband to stop being mean to you, then ask him. If you can stop Syrians dropping bombs and Mr. Trump being a mean president, or whoever you dislike, maybe you like Mr. Trump, I'm not being rude, there's always someone who doesn't like somebody. But if you can ask people to stop being mean, if you can ask people, do you understand my point? I mean, it's sort of like a ridiculous point almost. If you can say, please would you be so kind, kindly stop being mean to me. Stop the boss from being unkind to you. Stop your colleague at work from criticising you. Stop your sister-in-law from doing this. If you can do that, please, Buddha says, go for it, baby. But the point is, what if you can't? And let's look at life, and the fact of the matter is, much of the time, we cannot get the world to be the way we want it. It's a simple, profoundly practical, almost embarrassingly simple fact, you know. So what's the solution? Well, Buddha's is you change your mind instead. And what does it mean, change your mind? It's nothing weird, change your mind. But we kind of know it. Oh, she changed her mind. we usually mean it as a criticism. Oh God, she's always changing her mind. Well, all it means is you want to go to Rambo, instead of that you decide to go to something else instead. You change your mind. Well, we can do that here too. So instead of being convinced that my husband is wrong, I can decide that maybe it's not as bad as I think and he can see it from another point of view. But this is annoying and infuriating to hear, because let's say he really is horrible. So we tend to think if a person really is horrible, then what we say is, what do you mean I should change my mind? I'm allowed to be angry. I'm allowed to be jealous. And this is a powerful point because we say it. We know we say it. So it seems like, what do you mean I should change my mind? He should change. And if he really is a mean husband, if the boss really is mean, the politicians really are mean, then you're absolutely right. It's true. They are mean. But we have this kind of vindictiveness, this kind of, I'm allowed to be angry. As if somehow, and the point that Buddha's making, which should be breaking our hearts actually, is that we really could look into our mind and recognize, this is the point that's difficult, that yes, my husband cheated on me. Yes, fact. But the Buddha's saying, yes, he did that and it's not appropriate. We can all agree it's not moral, blah, blah, blah. We can all agree he's broken his agreement with you. We can all agree with that. But what he's saying is, it's the anger, the hurt, the jealousy, the bitterness, the resentment, the pain, the grief, the guilt, you name it. They are why I'm suffering. And this is hard to bear. Because it sounds like you're blaming, oh, you mean it's my fault. Ah, okay. But it's hard to hear it. Because we have all these assumptions about guilt and blame. I'm allowed to be angry. It's not fair. I didn't ask to get born. It's his fault. We have all these heavy kind of words that we use, you know. But the real point that Buddha's making, and this is something that we don't need Buddha to tell us, we can see it if we're brave enough, is that the jealousy itself, as you're sitting there in your room, overwhelmed by pain, that is the source of the pain, right there in your mind, right there in your mind itself. The pain in your mind itself is the suffering. I mean, in a way, we really do understand it. We can see it. We know it. But because we're so addicted to believing that the cause, husband's behaviour, or whatever, and that's what we obsess about, that's what we think about, that's what we describe. Tell me about your jealousy, Robina. I will give a detailed description of my husband's behaviour. No, Robina, tell me about your jealousy. I just did. No, darling, you didn't. You just described your husband through the lenses of jealousy. These words are not complicated. We know they're true, but sort of intuitively we can hear it. But it's the hardest job we'll ever do. Only because we're addicted to the opposite of dumping the responsibility on the outside. And it's exactly the same as happiness. Why are you happy, Robina? My husband is so kind to me. The boss is really good. The weather is beautiful. My health is good. There's money in the bank. People are kind to me. The food is delicious. Because we assume that the outside world is the cause of happiness. And we assume the outside world is the cause of suffering. Even though every day we can prove it, that it's not true. You can get a person that you know ticks all the boxes for happiness. Beautiful husband, lovely children, best house, good body, lovely face, money in the bank. And they kill themselves. So somehow we know these things, but we almost can't bear to think about it because it's too shocking a contradiction of what we instinctively believe. You can have a person we know, you know, who are in the nightmarish environment. Like that's why I like to talk about my friends in prison. I ran for many years, since the mid-90s until like 2009, I ran Liberation Prison Project. This FPFT project helping people in prison. It still exists, but I don't run it anymore. But there's this one and I can use lots of examples of people in prison who won't get out alive, on death row, people who are innocent, whatever, or not innocent, either way, but who've learned to know that they can't change the environment. But they've learned to be happy by changing their mind. So it really is not rocket science. The thoughts, the concepts, the theories are not complicated. But it's so utterly opposite to how we instinctively believe and what we therefore instinctively try to do in our lives. So that's why we shouldn't be kind of upset with ourselves for not being able to do it so easily. It's a deeply difficult job to do because we're addicted to the opposite job, that's all. In its nature, it's not difficult to change your mind. Yeah, okay, I like ice. I think I'll have vanilla instead. Thank you very much. It's easy. It takes as much breath as to say I want chocolate. But look how hard it is when you're stuck on one, you know. So these words are not complicated. But this is, and so this, putting it as simple as this is the essence of the Buddhist approach. All the methods are about doing this. You know, it might be very evident to us, because the trouble is Buddha's 2,500 years old, and often we hear it sounds like 2,500 years old, all the advice, you know, coming from Tibet, coming from India. But if we can really break it all down and get it to simple language that we all can, we understand. And this is why it's so important, just, you know, to remember again, just to remind us where this information comes from. Who is this person called Buddha, you know? Well, the biggest thing to remember that we need to remind ourselves and really look at the experiential implications of this point is that Buddha is not a creator. You know, in many ways, I mean, look at this. This is more fancy than Catholic churches. There's more holy things. Look, and I'm a nun, and I didn't do a prostration, did I? I didn't prostrate, did I? Never mind. Never mind. You know, it's like, it looks like religion. Look at it, you know. Smells like religion, acts like religion, sounds like religion. But it's shocking to hear then that Buddhism does not talk about a creator. So I think we have these assumptions. You know, it's very interesting. I notice we all in the world all ask the same questions. I really see that. Every one of us humans, in whatever language, whatever colour, whatever shape, we ask the same questions. It's very fascinating. But there's only one question I've ever had from one person ever so far. And he actually was a scientist in New Zealand, named Nelson. And he said, who revealed the teachings to the Buddha? Which is a brilliant question. But that assumes, doesn't it, the usual view of religion, which is it comes from a creator. That's the assumption, isn't it? The teachings are by nature revelation. They're from on high. They're from a being who is a superior being. I'll be sarcastic here. A superior being who runs the universe, who created the universe, and whose teachings Jesus, for example, will express. Whose teachings, what's his name, Mohammed will express. Isn't it? Or even Joseph Smith. He got his teachings from revelation, didn't he? This God came to him, this is what people say. So that's how we assume that religion, how religion is. So this guy was very shocked when I said, nobody. I said, he's like Einstein. But Einstein, we know perfectly well, has used his noggin, used his powers of observation, and has observed the universe, and has put together, he's come to a conclusion from his own observation that the concept of relativity is how things are. Let's say. So we know Einstein will not tell us that this is from revelation, that he had a vision yesterday, like Joseph Smith said, or like Jesus said for that matter. We know he will not tell us that he's kind of speculating or made it up or had a dream about it. And we absolutely know he would not ask us to believe it. We'd chuck him out the door on every count. But that's how we think of religion. And that's why we all say, well, I can believe what I like. And when we say believe, we mean not prove, because it's something from the sky. That's why we say I can believe what I like. I mean, actually speaking that way is very bizarre. It's very weird behaviour, frankly. It's like saying, I can believe that 1 + 1 is 3. I'm allowed to do it. Well, the fact is you are allowed to do it. No one can stop you, but it won't get you far. It won't get you far. You'll fight with everybody you know, because they all say, in fact, 1 + 1 is 2. And that's been proved. So that's why in the Buddhist one, and I really mean it sincerely, you know, because so therefore the Buddha was this regular guy who came out in this amazing tradition. I say this a lot lately because I happened to read the Dalai Lama one time, and I just heard it in passing. He said it was these amazing Indians, more than 3,000 years ago, who were the ones who began the investigation into the nature of self. Now we probably thought it was, you know, Mr. Freud, 150 years ago, wasn't it? Do you understand? Because I really say this, and I mean it sincerely. You know, we in our Judeo-Christian European culture, okay, if you're from Africa originally, you're not going to be calling yourself European. But us, you know, white Anglos, who come from the Catholics and the Christians and the Jews, do you get my point? And they go right back to the Greeks. And we love the Greeks. Half our fancy words are in Greek, aren't they? So what do we know about India? Absolutely zero. And that's really serious. And I don't. I'm a Buddhist. I've been a Buddhist for all these years. And I know Buddha's Indian, but I know nothing about India. I go there for years and years, but I don't look into their past. And then you realise, when you start to think about this, and you start to look a little bit into what the culture was like back then, it was absolutely astonishing. There were these sophisticated, amazing, great philosophers, great thinkers, who had this vast, intricate, astonishing world view. But in a way, it's our arrogance that all these Indians, we're Europeans. We're the Greeks. Do you understand? So it blew my mind when I realised that, you know, they were the ones. Okay, the Dalai Lama said. So in their pursuit of reality, you know, we can see all over the universe, people, humans, over the centuries, have looked into the meaning of life. They've done what the way the Tibetans would say it, that all these humans over the centuries who have looked into the meaning of life, they've done at least more than eat, sleep and go to the toilet. That's how the Tibetans talk. You waste your life if you just eat, sleep and go to the toilet, you know. But if you do more than that, how marvellous. All these amazing humans come up with different views about the universe. The Jews, the Christians, the Muslims, the big religions in our world. But also what about the Australian Aborigines and the people who are here in this country and below us in the south, before we white people came along, you know. There are unbelievable views on this planet of so many humans. That's why I always give respect to any view. I would never be so rude as to criticise any religion, any philosophy. I could disagree with them, but to be so arrogant, you know, which is how we are in our materialist world. And in any culture where you've got your fundamentalist and you believe you're right and the world is wrong. It's really quite shocking, you know. So anyway, these amazing Indians, they were the ones, these are great thinkers. They created this technique that the world knows now as vaguely as mindfulness meditation. That's just an offshoot, really. You know, and it's actually everybody makes up their own version of it, and that's okay. Buddha does not own the word mindfulness. But it comes from this extraordinary skill that if we really analyse it, should blow our minds. It's a skill that's called single-pointed concentration meditation. Forget the word meditation, because that just makes us weird, you know, just forget it. It's a psychological skill. A brilliant, ingenious skill that demands unbelievable rigour, discipline, time, effort, good morality, good ethics, that enables you to get your mind to go beyond the grosser level of all the berserk thoughts that are raging on all day, to beyond the conceptual, beyond the sensory consciousness, and to be able to access these more subtle levels of mind that the materialist views of the mind, our culture, do not even posit as existing. That's why we think it's mystical, you know. But it's actually a powerful technique that demands incredible time, and it's one of the, when Buddha finally diverged in his own direction from the previous Indians 2,500 years ago, when he came up with his own direct experiential findings about the nature of self. All Buddha's teachings come down to that. This is one of the main techniques he brought with him. And this is a technique that is still living extant today, this single point of concentration. To get it, you need several years to be in a really isolated place, but it's such a powerful technique to get. You can't just get it by doing a bit before breakfast, you know. And people, this moment, including people from our culture, are achieving this single pointedness. It's a state of mind that's so much more subtle that we don't even posit as existing, that's completely calm, completely still, completely focused, that's really powerful. I mean, if you read the qualities of a person who's accomplished this, you'd think it's science fiction, you know. But this is what I'm pointing out to, is this technique that these amazing Indians developed. They basically, on the basis of this subtle level of cognition, they actually mapped the human mind, but internally. We map the brain with a microscope. They use the microscope of their own mind. And this technique is one of the key ones, the central techniques in Buddhism. It's absolutely extraordinary, actually, if you think about it. So the model of the mind that's studied in Buddhism is the basis of every word that you're going to be hearing from my mouth this week. Any other thing you hear in this room is based upon the findings of these Indians first. Buddha then diverged in his own direction, like I said, and came up with his own alternative findings about many things. But it was already there, extant, this vast living worldview. All the views about karma, which we're going to go into. These are coming from these Indians already, you know. There are various interpretations coming from the Buddha. So there's a vast, intricate, sophisticated worldview, fundamentally different from our view. Absolutely, there's no question. But what do we know about that, like I said? And then it just really struck me when I heard that. There were these Indians more than 3,000 years ago, you know. And they created this technique, and that's one of the central techniques that Buddha would say we need to cultivate in order to do this job that he says we can do, to unpack and unravel this crazy mind of ours, so we can do the job of ridding it of all the utter nonsense, which is the source of suffering, and growing all the goodness, which is the source of happiness. This is the essence of being a Buddhist, you know. So therefore, if it's true, as Buddha, okay, what's interesting too is the Tibetan equivalent for the word Buddha, it's Sanskrit. The Tibetan word is Sangye. So the etymology of that word is very tasty, I tell you. Sang implies the total eradication from one's mind one's consciousness, these words are used synonymously, of all these neuroses, all this stuff, ego, and all the voices of crazy ego, the stuff that we totally assume are absolutely normal. So normal in our culture that you'd be considered abnormal if you didn't have them. We totally take them for granted. We give them equal status along with the good stuff. So sun implies the utter eradication of all the rubbish. And yay implies the development to perfection of all the goodness. These words are so simple, but we always can't hear them. Because if you go, one of you might be a therapist, and I come and ask you, please give me methods to get rid of all ego, all fears, all anger, all anxiety, all depression, forever. And have infinite love and compassion for all beings all the time. You will think I'm mentally ill and give me many pills to calm me down. And I'm serious, you would. This is exactly what Buddha is saying. And don't hear it as religion in the sky, please. It's practical psychology. If Buddha deals with the mind, he doesn't use the word soul, then psychology is a Greek word. We use a fancy word for the mind, that's all. Come on, people. Psychology is Greek. Buddha didn't speak Greek. Do you understand my point? Mm-hmm. So Buddha's got psychology, he talks about the mind. What else? If you talk about the mind, you're talking about psychology. That's all Buddha talks about. Not some secret part called a soul. It's not mysterious. It's not crossing your fingers and hoping for the best. It's a full-on, hard, doable job. That's the point here. And that's why merely saying, I believe in reincarnation, or I believe in karma, or I believe in Buddhism. It's fine to do that. I mean, Buddha's a nice guy. There's nothing wrong with believing in it. And he existed historically. There's nothing wrong with believing it. He did exist. But that's like saying, you'd be laughed at if you said, I believe in mathematics. Well, I'm happy you do, because it works. But what good is believing in it? Because if your mother says go and buy 5 oranges, you don't know how to count, so you can't do it. So what's the point of believing in something? It won't get you far. And that's the major point to try and understand. I never use the word believe. It is existing in Buddhist psychology. If you say you go to an acupuncturist and you have no idea about acupuncture, you can't possibly say you've no knowledge of acupuncture. You haven't. But you can validly say that you really trust your acupuncturist. You can say that. That's like believing in your acupuncturist. But you don't know acupuncture. So it's okay. So you can believe in a mathematician and they will tell you how to count 5 oranges. That's fine. But if you can't do it yourself, you can't get far. So believing is still okay. But it won't get you far. If you have to help someone else with acupuncture, you're lost. If you have to buy 5 oranges, if you don't know math, you're lost. If you believe in botany, but don't know how to grow a garden, you're lost. That's the difference between believing in something and doing something. Well, the Buddhist approach is to do it. Any decent religion should be the same. But to merely believe, and in a way that's okay in Christianity. I was brought up a Catholic. And by definition, you can't prove God to be right. That's the worst possible sin of pride. Because God, by definition, is beyond everybody else. So you need to have 100% belief in God. And I actually don't criticize that. I think it's an amazing way to live your life. If you really do have faith in God, you'll be a happy person. Because you know God's got a plan, He's got it in His pocket, He doesn't need to share it with you, and you have faith in it. And that's cool. Except we all complain if God doesn't do what we like. We really don't have faith in Him at all. You understand my point? We want it both ways, We want to believe in God, and yet we want Him to kind of give His reasons. Do you understand? When He's the boss, He doesn't have to give His reasons. And I really think that's powerful. That's why I'm so full of admiration, One, like in Malaysia one year, one of those planes went down. It was an Air Asia plane, and all Malaysian customers on the plane. And this couple, this what happened to my thermos? Can we bring it from the car? We didn't, did we? It doesn't matter, I've got a cup. I'm okay. Look, I've got a cup. Excuse me, I have to drink my hot water before it gets cold. His parents, they asked, how do you feel about the death of your daughter in the plane? They said, she belongs to God. Oh. Which is best, that one or the other one?
Yeah. That's good.
That's better, closer.
Yeah.
Okay. They said, she belongs to God. He has taken her back. We are content. So what I'm getting, this is my whole point now. In a way, this is my point. The Buddha's saying, whatever goes on in your mind, your thoughts, your interpretations of things, is the source of your happiness and suffering. Well, look at that. even if it's not true that there's a God. Hear my point now for a second. Even let's say it's not true, and Buddha would argue and say there's no creator. He has a different interpretation of reality. But let's just say there's no creator. But you have the words in your mind are, we have faith in God, and she has taken it back. So then what's the consequence of that for them? They were content. They were happy. So you can almost argue you can change your thoughts even if it's something that's not true and it can cause you happiness. Please, go for it. Yeah. I mean, I'm not joking here. In a way, you can say that, temporarily. Look, the example I use, and this is why you could argue in a way it's like fantasy, but it really isn't. This is a really powerful point, actually. My friend's in prison. There's one woman, I only read about her. I read a story, and since she got out of prison, I read about it, and I'm really moved by her. She's an amazing example. She's, back in the 70s, she was a hippie, hitching with a hippie husband in Florida. And a hippie kids, 3 hippie kids. Whatever, these hippies. Hitching. 2 guys picked them up. I forget all the story. But 2 guys picked them up. The cops stopped the guys. The guys killed the cops and blamed the hippies. So they're on death row. She was there 12 years and then 5 more years before she got out. The husband was executed. Try and hear this, okay? I mean, look how we feel when someone accuses you of breaking a cup and you didn't. We'll never get over it. But you didn't kill anybody. There's a bunch of hippies, nice people. She's the sweetest lady, you can't imagine. I read her memoir, On death row. Husband even executed. You can't bear to think about it, really, if you think about it. And at some point, she said, I finally realized I couldn't change anything. But they couldn't take my mind from me. I think she did yoga and things. I think she was a Buddhist, did yoga and stuff. She said, so I decided, I'm not a prisoner. I'm a monk. I'm not in a cell. I'm in a cave. So if you unpack that, what she just did was literally change her mind. I mean, it's not joking, But can you only conceive of the process, the power, the confidence, the humility, the emotional intelligence she'd have to go through to get to that conclusion? Because normally, the normal scenario, and I remember reading about that at the same time, one guy on death row, also innocent. He was what we would call typical, normal. He went completely out of his brain. It was rage and despair, screaming daily as long as he had a voice. I did not rape and kill that woman. So we would say he's normal, but she's kind of weird, I mean, we love to read about people like that, but we just think the other one's normal. We don't ever think, that's interesting, I wonder if I could do that. We don't think that. We just think she's just kind of born that way, she's just kind of weird. But the other normal one was like me, I'd go crazy too. The assumption even in that is that we don't think we can change our mind. That's the point I'm getting at. We don't even believe we can change our mind. And then we think, well, why should I? So if someone got to that guy who was normal, out of his brain with suffering, no one's arguing with his suffering. Well, sweetheart, I've got some methods for you here. You could learn to change your mind and be less angry. You could be sued for giving wrong advice. That's like as if you're blaming him. That's how we think about it. So the first point about God was even if it's not true, you can see the benefit of changing your mind, So here, you could argue with that woman. One person, when I quoted this in a class, and someone said, well, that's just fantasy. What's the point of having a fantasy? But if you analyse it, it's not a fantasy. It is that she's not a monk, it's true. But what she meant was, why don't I see this situation as good and see how I can get the most of it, given that I can't get out? I mean, it's so intelligent. Given you can't change it, change your mind. The bottom line is, if you want to be happy or suffering, that's the point. Because that's the conclusion, This is the essence of the Buddhist approach to happiness. And of course, it takes time. It's not magic and it won't happen overnight. And it's the most difficult job we'll all do. And the more we listen to Buddhist psychology, the Buddhist teachings about emptiness and all the long-term stuff, the more it's reasonable how profoundly difficult it is. But we have to start somewhere. Even by hearing the logic of it first, that gives us some confidence to even maybe think, perhaps I can try, This is the heart of Buddhist practice, actually. It's way more to it than this, it's clear. But this is the beginning of the steps that take us to eventually the culmination, this achievement of Sangye. There's way more to it. But this is the essence of it. Now, you can argue until we start to do this, you can't say you're being a Buddhist. And that's not being rude or anything. You don't have to pass an exam in being a Buddhist. But if you say you're a Buddhist, it just doesn't mean you like Buddha. You can like Buddha. Look, you like him, he's a nice guy. You can say that if you like. You can say you like Buddha. You can. But what part of Buddha? You can say he's got a cute nose. But the point of Buddha is what his teachings, right? So if you like Buddha, you've got to like his teachings. And if you like them, then it might be helpful to try them. Otherwise, you're a bit schizophrenic, isn't it? I love Federer, but I always go to the soccer. No, that's ridiculous. You better, you put your money where your mouth is, So, okay, if it's true then, that what goes on in our mind is what we can change, this sounds quite abstract to us sometimes. Because you know that if you change your mind one day, you want to have, instead of, it's normally, like if I go to the ice cream shop, I always have chocolate ice cream. It's just how I am. For me, ice cream equals chocolate ice cream. So it'd be quite shocking if I changed my mind one day and had vanilla. Let's just say I could. So then it doesn't seem complicated, does it? Because I'm going to say, I want chocolate ice cream. It's a thought. Then I decide, no, okay, there's no chocolate. Okay, I would like vanilla ice cream. Well, it's not complicated, and it seems almost embarrassingly simple. It just takes, like I said, it takes as much breath, as much effort to say a different thought, to change your mind. That's fine. But look at the benefit of it. Look at the reason behind it. Because if I'm attached, and this is the point we've got to get to, what is it in our mind then that makes it so difficult to change our mind? Because it sounds pretty easy. Vanilla, chocolate, sounds about the same, just another sound. White instead of brown. So what is it in our mind that makes it hard? Because it's not the chocolate ice cream's fault. That doesn't mind. So we have to look into the mind and know what it is. And this is the Buddhist psychological model, What is it in our mind that is the source of suffering? And then we should analyse why are certain thoughts the problem. Because in the end, well, this is again surprising to us, we've got to really look at this. When we talk about really problems, like in anger and rage and despair and grief and loss and the dramas that poor guy on death row, for example, or your husband cheating on you, we just don't think of thoughts. That sounds like hilarious, So when we think of mind, we think of thoughts. Vanilla ice cream, chocolate ice cream, thoughts. But then you've got deep depression, you want to kill yourself, or deep rage and you want to murder your husband. It seems like a joke to call it thoughts, doesn't it? Because we call it feelings, emotions. And that's where we think it's impossible to change. You think, how can I change a feeling? That's impossible. And I agree. But then we have to understand, let's look at the Buddhist explanation of these states of mind. And when do they get to the point of becoming this pure feeling? And this is what you understand even theoretically. It's very helpful. This is the Buddhist model, okay? So, one thing the Buddha is saying is that what goes on in our mental consciousness is billions of thoughts. They point here, interestingly, our mind, mental consciousness. There's billions of thoughts. We know this. From the second we wake up in the morning till the second we go to sleep, we know. Get up and you're on autopilot already. You know what to do. You get out, you go pee, you do this, you have a cup of tea, you brush your teeth, whatever you do. We know we're on autopilot, aren't we? But we know underneath, never stopping, these countless thousands of thoughts. I think even in Western psychology, and Buddha for sure agrees, like 1,000 thoughts a second. There's this constant rate, like a sound, what we have that machine to try to go to sleep. It sounds weird, white noise. That's right, exactly. I think it's the most hideous thing I've ever heard. I mean, I try to go to sleep with that. I can't believe it, And it really shows how you interpret the sound. It's like the woman in prison saying, "I'm not in prison. I'm a monk." Because one time I was at a place, it was actually in Puerto Rico, and it was near the beach, and I was there for a few weeks editing things. And the sound of I love the sound of the ocean, right? But then you listen to, my brother lives in a house where there's a distant sound of the freeway. But I swear to you, it sounds like the ocean. But he calls it the freeway, so he freaks out. When I call it the ocean, then I'm happy. So do you understand my point? Because it really is this constant kind of in the background. And you could easily say it's the freeway. So you straight away get angry. But it was the ocean. Oh, isn't that lovely? So that white, so-called white noise machine, I can't believe how you can think it's a nice sound. To me, all I can hear is like this dreadful sound. So it's really true. What the point I'm getting at, and we kind of know this, we don't need Buddha to tell us. But it's the meaning we put into thoughts. It's the meaning. It's the meaning. So in the end, Buddha's saying we've got these thousands of thoughts. And in a way, these thoughts now we know, it was what we call our unconscious. And we know it's still just the tip of the iceberg because we know that lots of stuff comes up in dreams. And all this is really a mystery world to us in our culture and in our psychology. And it's understandable because we only talk about the brain, you know. So there's no concept, there's no comprehension of all this deep unconscious, all these thousands of thoughts raging on. Well, the Buddha's view of the mind is so hilariously different, I can't tell you, in so many ways different. The Buddha's view, first of all, would be your mind's not physical. That's a big shock to us. So we take that as our hypothesis here, okay? It's not physical. It absolutely relies on one decent brain, but absolutely crystal clear in Buddhist view, Buddhist psychology, Buddhist metaphysics, Buddhist philosophy, Buddhist worldview. It has been found from the Buddha's observation, and anybody else who's done this job, that your consciousness goes way beyond the grosser level. This is what you do with this single point of concentration. Your mind goes to a more subtle level that does not depend upon the brain. That's why we think it's mysterious in our culture. But it's just a subtler level of your own cognitive process. And that technique is there, available to anybody who wants to access that subtle level. And we need to in the long term, to the Buddhist view. So first of all, the grosser level is for sure our mind. And that's the part that does depend upon the brain. That's our conceptual level and the sensory. But this is the tip of the iceberg for the Buddhist view, you know. So at that level, we have, so the first is not physical. Second, it goes to way more subtle levels. The third point about the mind is really shockingly different, both if you're a Christian, a Muslim, or if you're a materialist, is that you're not the handiwork of anybody else. That's the weirdest idea in Buddhism. That someone else can create you. Someone else can make your mind. This is body, no problems. Your mother and father very kindly worked to get that egg and sperm come together. Thank you, Mum and Dad. But they did not give you a mind. This is a hugely different point for the Buddha. They give you the genes, the DNA, the mind, the brain, yep, the brain, but not your thoughts, feelings, emotion, unconscious, subconscious, not your tendency to kill or lie or steal or be psychotic, not your tendency to love music or be good at football or to be kind and generous. That's your mind, and this is the fundamental difference of the Buddha. But nor is any of that stuff coming from a creator. Neither of these views for the Buddha. Because in both those cases, at least you agree on one thing, that you, Robina, began in your mother's womb. That's the view of the Christian teaching, that God put the soul there, and the materialist one is that Mummy and Daddy merely got the egg and sperm together. And that you track yourself back to Mummy, Daddy, Grandma, Grandpa, back to the monkeys, isn't it? That's where we come from, we say. Not for the Buddha. Absolutely, fundamentally, completely different. So clearly it's not evident that easy to prove this in the beginning, but you take it as your hypothesis. Nothing's easy to prove in the beginning. You have to learn the theory first. So with the Buddha, our consciousness, which is not physical, but got the grosser level and the much more subtle levels of cognition. They use the term even mental continuum. Think of it like a river of mental moments. A river of mental moments. All these thoughts and feelings and emotions of this second come from the previous moment, come from the previous, in this unbroken chain, isn't it, of mental moments. Thinking of it like that. So if you track this back, if you had perfect memory and track back every millisecond of your thoughts and feelings and emotions, you'd keep going back today, yesterday, the day before. Where did this moment of thoughts come from? The previous moment. Guess what? Where did the thoughts of 1 o'clock yesterday come from? The second before that. Where did the thoughts of when I was 3 come from? When I was 2 and 4, not 4/5. You keep going back inexorably. And you end up back in your mother's womb. Maybe my mind began then. No, because that moment of consciousness came from a previous moment. And you get back to the first second of conception. So then, of course, the question is, where does that moment of consciousness come from? Well, it can't come from nothing. The Buddha's view is very clear that the non-physical consciousness is not a direct product of physical. It can't come from the egg and sperm. And the Buddha would say it's just, it is not, he would talk about the created thing in a completely different way. He says we don't need to be created by somebody else. He says our consciousness goes back to a previous moment of itself, before the egg and sperm came together. And then a few weeks before that, you'll find that it was in a previous body. And then before that, it was in a previous body. That's just the world view. That was in there. That view was already available to these great yogis before the Buddha came along. The great Indian yogis observed this with their minds, you know. Reincarnation symbol, karma. That's a massive part of the Buddhist philosophical view, which we'll talk about over the week. This is a huge part of Buddhism. I mean, you can be a 1% Buddhist. You can not bother with all that. You don't have to. You can do what you like. You can take a little bit of what I've been saying before, which sounds common sense, and we can try that. That's up to us. But this is, you know, the bigger picture, the Buddhist view. So our consciousness is not a handiwork of mummy and daddy, and it's not a handiwork of a creator. So the crucial point here, the real implication of this, is that it's therefore mine. Because the Buddha's view about karma, which we're going to go into in more detail, not maybe now, I'm not sure, is that this is the way the mind works, every millisecond of what we think and do and say is this constant, elaborate process of like creating ourselves. It's called creating karma. Every millisecond of what we think and do and say is a process of programming us, sowing seeds in the mind that will produce future experiences, our own experiences. And we are the producer of our present experiences from the past, and we now are producing our future experiences, the Buddha would say. So in just the same way that we know in this life, if you sat there and learned mathematics and learned music and learned psychology, that you basically programmed your mind in that knowledge, and then you wake up one day and you're good at it. Was from having done it before and programming yourself with it, of sowing the seeds of it in this life. Well, Buddha just extends that same logic, but to before this birth, that's all. So if you take the view that consciousness is this non-physical river of mental moments, it's not a very difficult concept just to conceptualize it, to understand it. That's a different discussion. To prove it eventually, we can. Of course, Buddha would say there's nothing he says that you can't prove. He would say that very clearly. So the view here is very, in the sense then, that if my mind comes from before, then it's my mind, then I can change it. And the view of karma brings the one of accountability, of not blaming others, of not blaming yourself either, not guilt, not blame, but of accountability. That what's in my mind is there because I put it there. And so then I can be in charge of what I put in my mind now, which will produce the future. So it's up to me. I'm the boss, you know. Like the Dalai Lama calls karma, he said one time, it's like self-creation. It's a good concept. It really is like that. So it's in this sense a very different view. In this sense. Words like anger, love, compassion, gosh, we all know those. But the way they function, how we understand them from the Buddhist perspective is quite different too. So what I'm getting at here, one of the points I'm making, first is unconscious. The point in Buddhism, besides the one of the qualitative programming of seeds planted that produce future experiences, happiness and suffering, the other thing about the mind is, Geshe Tashi, one of our lamas in London, as he said, it's like we're shooting a movie all day. Any sentient being, any ant, any monkey, any human, as much as whatever we experience through any of our senses, even without awareness, everything is like put into our memory. There's nothing that goes astray. So what I'm getting at is this deep, vast unconscious in there. It's not just from this life. We come fully programmed with this stuff from countless past lives, and it's all there in our memory. All that's why people have in your dreams, because your dreams are more subtle. Your consciousness during dreams is more subtle consciousness. That's when we can access all this weird stuff that people have clairvoyant experiences. All this is fitting with the Buddhist view. There's so much stuff buried in there. So our unconscious, just day to day, is like the tip of the iceberg, even of the unconscious, you know. And we just assume it's not able to be understood. We just assume it's just this weird stuff. No one knows why it's there, you know. No one knows why it's there. No one knows why I have all these weird feelings. No one knows why I have these weird dreams, you know, because it's from so much in the past, Buddha says. All just programmed in there. And the Buddha's saying we can learn to unpack and unravel all of it long term. This is the massive job long term. There's all our mind. And it's ours, and it's up to us to reconfigure it, completely reprogram it. So it needs single point of concentration. And it's a long-term job, you know. And this is the process of stopping suffering and getting happiness. Because what goes on in here is the source of all of it. And what's in here, at the grosser level, is a bunch of thoughts. Trillions of them. And this is where the hard part is, to get to see the relationship between thoughts and feelings and emotions. So if we have to get in touch with all this stuff and unpack and unravel it in the long term, slowly, then this is where this technique comes in as vitally important, this single point of concentration. The world knows it vaguely as mindfulness. It's this powerful technique. And we can all begin it somewhere, that enables us to step out of our head, even a little bit, to be, and we simply, it's what it is a concentration technique. You're learning to focus. And why would you want to do that? Because at the moment it's total chaos. It's just total chaos. We go from pillar to post in here, don't we? But look what you're like when you can't get to sleep one night. Your mind is berserk for hours, isn't it? That's how it is all the time. And because we're busy doing the dishes and driving a car, we don't notice it. When you're lying there in the middle of the night, you notice it. It's like it all the time. Berserk. Isn't it? I mean, is it not?
Yes.
Okay, right. Exactly. We can control it. We can learn to work with it. And this is a long-term job, I tell you. That's like science fiction to us. There's this beautiful book I've just been working on now, editing. It's called Mahamudra by Namayeshi. We'll talk about it maybe during the week. It's this beautiful, it's a very particular meditation technique. Really marvellous. And so Lama in there talks about the qualities of a person who's accomplished single-pointed concentration. It really is like science fiction for us. The level of clarity, of joy, of fulfillment, of contentment, of wisdom, of unbelievable power and qualities, what we can achieve mentally. And this technique's been around since these Indians for 3,000 years, And what do we know about it in our culture? Zero. So really we should be a bit humble. It's absolutely astonishing. And for the Buddha, that's just the beginning to get this focus. So you can then do the real job of unpacking and unraveling all the crazy concepts in here that are the source of our habits and suffering. So many more things to say, but maybe you can better ask me some questions. What a nice watch. Look at that. Any questions so far? And we'll go into more detail. Any questions about what I've said?
How do you know when it's time to change the environment if the suffering becomes too
Yeah,
much?
good point, good point. The irony of the suffering of the way we are is that when we're in the victim mode, and that's the best way to talk about when we're miserable, there's something horrible about us, but that means you're feeling completely hopeless. And there's no sense that I have any choice about anything. We feel like we're completely drowning in misery, don't we? It could be the lousy relationship, it could be the lousy job. So the point is, because we're so caught up in the anger and the fears and the jealousy and the depression, the tragedy is there's no feeling of having any capacity to make any choices. We just go back like a moth to a flame. Do you understand what I'm saying? So even the question, when do I start to make some choices about leaving or staying, that already implies already you're getting out of the victim mode. You understand? Look at the stories you hear about people who are in a terribly abusive relationship for 30 years. You'd think that they should have asked themselves the question by now, or perhaps I should leave. You understand my point? But the tragedy is when we're in the victim mode, there's no sense of choice. We're like a complete infant who's dragged from pillar to post by all the circumstances. That's the tragedy of the suffering of our crazy minds. So to get to the point where you can ask the question, you're halfway to liberation, baby. Do you understand my point?
Yes.
You'd think, would you not, if you ate a piece of food one day and it made you vomit, you try it again the next day, and you vomit again, you'd think by the third time you might suggest that perhaps you wouldn't try it anymore, isn't it? But there we go back like a moth to a flame to the same abusive partner for 30 years. We've got to look at what it is in us that's really just prevents us from seeing the seemingly simple thought that you've got some choices. Do you understand? It's pretty stunning, isn't it? So when we can have the courage to recognise that when it comes to any situation, your sister, your good friend, the husband, you name our lives consist of work and family, isn't it? Just about. So we've got these choices all the time, actually. And so, basically we've got two choices. We've got two options. Stay, because you've thought about it, you've weighed it up, and it mightn't be perfect, but you really realise you've got the inner skill to learn from this and get something from it. Do you understand? And you've got to have the inner skill to do that. Because if you're in that abusive relationship and you don't even know you have a choice, then you're lost. But if you even know, beginning to... I think the battery's running out. It's disappearing a bit. Yeah. So then you've got two choices. Okay, let me give you an example. This is a good example. I always use this example. A friend of mine in Australia, she's like a grandmother now, but she's got this alcoholic husband, okay? So from the beginning you could imagine she probably got upset when she realised he's alcoholic, and she'd hoped to get him to change, naturally, because who wants an alcoholic husband? You understand? Nobody. Do you understand? So she naturally tried to change it, you know, and then slowly, I don't know when it was in the relationship, but by now they've got children, grandchildren, everything. She slowly started to dawn on her that he wasn't going to change. So the point is, what happens normally then, you get bitter, you get angry, you fight, you yell, or like one family I knew, that the wife made the husband drink in the garage. I mean, talk about the passive aggression in that situation. You can't even imagine it, you know. And they go to sleep in the same bed again that night. I mean, I hyperventilate when I hear this nightmares, you know. Do you understand? So all these are the scenarios that we typically do. And then you kill him or he kills you, isn't it? I always quote, I'm not trying to be depressing here, this is not about men. 40% of all women who get murdered on this planet, you know who murders them, don't you? Yeah. The bloke in the same bed. So it's not against men. This is pointing out the nightmare of our crazy minds when we're feeling victims and we're hopeless and we're full of attachment and jealousy and grief. This is the tragedy, you know. So this woman, at some point, and by this time I think she might have even had little grandchildren, she weighed up the options. She's a Buddhist. So she weighed up what would be good about staying. The kids, the grandkids, the husband himself. It happens to be, and I know the man, he's really kind. He doesn't vomit over anybody. And he's now retired, and now, I mean, I've seen him. He goes out at night, sits by the tree with his dog. He likes nature. He's very quiet. He drinks his 5 bottles of beer quietly. Then he comes in, and dinner's ready at 7, and he drinks his 4 bottles of red. Every day of his life, and he goes to sleep. But he doesn't vomit over anybody. He's kind, he's generous, he shares his money, he adores his wife. So she made her mind up years ago, recognising he won't change, but she decided it was the best for everybody. So she decided to stay. So she changed her mind. She didn't stay and then still get bitter about him. She changed her mind and decided to love him for who he is, to see his good qualities, and to weigh it up and recognise the good quality, like the woman on death row. But if you can't cope with it, if you don't, and don't blame him if you're brave enough, you'd realise you can't live with it. It's too difficult for you. You want a more nurturing husband. You want a person who listens to you. You know, let's say you need that, then you make a decision to go. But it seems so simple. But if we could do this, there'd be 40% more women on the planet. You understand my point? I mean, it's as simple as that, but it demands already some inner awareness and some self-respect. Because who in their right mind would keep going back to an abusive relationship and continue to complain? That's the tragedy, because we not only realise we can't leave the job, we don't even realise we can change our mind about the job. So we go back complaining about the job, not realising we've changed either our mind or the job. I mean, we are a nightmare. Do you see my point? So you weigh up what your skills are, darling. You weigh up if it's worth it. And part of our problem too, and I'm up against my Catholic upbringing, I love God, I love the Catholic upbringing, I was a great Catholic. But the whole business about divorce, how it's wrong and we're supposed to stay together forever and it's a sacrament, and this drags us into guilt and I shouldn't leave and that kind of business, you know. I mean, the Buddhist view is so practical. Karma runs out, right? Karma runs out, for God's sake. You can't force life into a thing that doesn't have it anymore. So if it's difficult for you for a start, you should make a decision out of respect for everybody. Better leave. But we use all the reasons. Oh, I can't go. Oh, the world won't like it. Oh, I shouldn't go. Oh, he might be upset. Oh, he really does love me. Or he might change one day. Like, we're like babies, you know. So you've got to weigh up your own skills where you're at and then make a decision. But it's not that easy, we can see already. Isn't it? Because there's so many other factors, especially when it's relationships. You know, a job maybe even is okay, but still we find so many reasons. And that's what I'm trying to get at here when I start to look at the unhappy states of mind and try to unpack them, because these are why we suffer. If we have more wisdom and more clarity and more kindness and more contentment, they would outweigh our anger and fears and jealousy, but often it's the other way around. Then we'll really live a great life. Do you understand what I'm saying? And we don't always make the perfect decision. We make mistakes. We're not perfect. But part of our problem too, I think, and this is something more, it's a much deeper, okay, I haven't even begun to talk about attachment yet, but one of our problems, Buddha would call it attachment, which is a massive one. But one of our deepest problems, and we'll go back to this later, is what people think about us. We don't realise, but since we're born, that's determining most of our choices. It's so subtle and so utterly there all the time. It's like almost a symptom of being this unhappy person. We're all the time there. Our attachment's much grosser than that, but this is the deepest one, and often that keeps us paralysed. We're so scared to make a decision that might be criticised by somebody. We're so fearful what God thinks, mummy, daddy, the judge, auntie, uncle, they, this world out there. And then we have zero power. Zero, just we're paralyzed. So the words are easy enough, but my goodness, this is the product of practice. Do you understand? And it's right, it's different for different people at different times. But if you do stay at the job, the relationship, whatever, it's got to be for the right reason, not out of fear, not out of just passivity. Because you really realise there's some benefit. Okay, it could be a job. There's something you're learning in this job. It's something worthwhile. And you know, because let's say you're a Buddhist and you're trying to work on your mind, and you know the boss is making you crazy, but you know that it's good for you. You get it, you learn it. It's like playing tennis with a person who's more qualified. It's very hard work, but you're really lifting your game, aren't you? If you can see your life like that, then you'll really get a lot out of it. But you don't have to do that if you don't have to. It can be just, it doesn't mean because it's difficult you have to stay. But it doesn't mean if it's difficult that you have not to stay either. You have to know your own mind well enough and have the courage to to always want to do what's most beneficial for you and others. And then, but knowing also you can't make everybody happy. You cannot possibly do what everyone will be happy. You will go mad thinking that. And there's nothing wrong with truly deciding this is best for me, for my path and my progress, even if other people are hurt. You can't win, You have to decide different times. So my friend realized that she was able to have freedom in that. He didn't stop her. He gave her money. He was a kind, generous husband. So she does a Buddhist retreat. She goes off for 6 months, 6 weeks. She can do that and be there for everybody. So it was the best of both worlds for her, So each of us has got to weigh it up. Because either way, like the woman in prison, she was able to be happy living there on death row. The bonus is she got out, okay? And that's what's possible if we can be brave enough. But it's not necessarily better to stay. Do you understand?
Yeah, so with my situation, I'm not sure how to ask the question, but is meaningful work a naive situation? Is it like a pride? Is it a...
Well, it can be, but no, it doesn't have to follow, because the bottom line in the Buddhist one is, whatever's meaningful is it has to help you become less attached, less neurotic, less angry, less jealous, more wise, more kind, and more useful. So if that means even working in a place where you make $1 million a month, that could be the best job for you because you're using your skills and you're being generous. So just to go and buy more houses, there's no benefit. But if you're really using this skill to help you develop a better mind and to be able to benefit others, wow, baby, go for it. Working in a homeless shelter can be the best job for you. Working in a bank, it doesn't matter what the job is. If it helps you know your mind well, help you interact with others and learn some patience and skill, but grow your qualities, grow your skills, so you can be a better human being on the planet, nothing wrong with that, darling. Nothing wrong with that. The bottom line is if it doesn't harm others. I mean, if you're working in a gun factory and it's a great job doing the accounts, I'd say, okay, think twice. Do you understand my point?
Yes.
So look at the product and that you're participating in making or accompanying what they do. If it's not harmful, I mean, it can be. If it's like I say a money company, it could be used to buy guns, but it could be used to do good things too. So it's hard to say when working on money. Do you understand what I'm saying? Being a finance person, let's say, it could be a brilliant skill. So that's up to you to work out. The bottom line is, if it makes you more intelligent, more wise, more kind, more compassionate, not just bright and clever, it's got to also help you be more useful and more within yourself, more fulfilled and content. That's the bottom line. You can call that Buddhism or not, it's just common sense, though. Do you understand?
I think you answered the question now.
Good.
With that last one.
Good, darling. I'm very happy. Perfect. Good. Yeah.
How might we overcome our suffering over someone we've lost, whether it's to death or perhaps a rift?
They've left you for a younger version. Darling, this is, okay, all of this means we have to, that's what I'm trying to get to, is start to look into these individual states of mind that Buddhist psychology refers to as the neurotic ones, the mean ones, the unhappy ones. Not to feel guilty about them, but these are the ones we have to identify, because if we suffer, it's because of these. I mean, compassion doesn't mean you suffer. If you cry because of somebody who's died, that doesn't necessarily mean it's called suffering. Suffering isn't if you've got tears. That could be out of compassion. But suffering would be if you're feeling self-centered and miserable and pathetic and low self-esteem or hurt or grief-stricken and never growing up, That's what suffering is. Do you understand, darling? And we're all human. We've all got it. So but it's a mixture of things, sweetheart. I mean, we haven't even begun to look at the states of mind yet. But the key thing in Buddhist psychology, as you must know if you've been coming here, there's a state of mind in Buddhist psychology. the mental consciousness, or our thoughts and feelings and emotions, this workshop in here, as Alan Zopa calls it, all the contents are divided into 3 categories, only 3 categories. There are those that are neurotic, delusional, ridiculous, ego-based, miserable, unhappy, that make a mess of us, that cause us to make a mess in our life. We get that. Anger, attachment, jealousy. You understand? Simple words. Then there's the second category, which are called virtue, compassion, kindness, love, intelligence, joy. We know that stuff too. The third lot, I like to call them the mechanics of the mind. It's all those states of mind that everybody needs. Whether you're a murderer or a meditator, you've got to have good concentration. So concentration is one of those. It's not a virtuous state of mind in its nature, but it's super necessary. So there's many of those when you learn Buddhist psychology. So the ones we're really caring about here, we have to make the distinction between the neuroses and the good ones. And there's like a big soup in there. So in terms of, say, grief, you're talking about grief really, aren't you? I think that's a term, if you look in Buddhist psychology, you won't find an equivalent term. But I think that word, we use it, using Buddhist reference, there's a mixture of attachment, but also just plain old, and compassion maybe, and a close connection with somebody. So karmically, you might have a certain connection with a certain person, your beloved ex-boyfriend, your mother, a sister, it doesn't matter who it is. There's karmic connection from the past, Buddha says, which is interesting to factor in. A really close connection with that person. And then secondly, if there's been love in that relationship, then that's a really dear relationship. If it's your mean, ugly ex-partner who brutalises you every day, you'll almost be happy that they're dead, you know, not really, but you get my point. But if there's affection and love there, as well as a strong connection, that's what brings the sadness. But the grief is mainly, if we can never get over it, if we never get over it, never get healed from it, and always stay depressed and miserable, that's because of attachment. And that's hard to understand initially. But it's just it's humanity, sweetheart. It's how we are, darling. So part of the process, part of what's painful, as we know very well, was when we have a good thing, a good relationship, one of our main sufferings is it's unbearable to think that it will end, isn't it? It's just so unbearable. So to think about death, or someone leaving us, is almost beyond bearing, isn't it? Because attachment, we can't bear things changing when it's nice. And that's part of the pain, is that, you know. I mean, you understand what I'm saying, don't you? So, sweetheart, it doesn't go overnight, like you know. But the more we look into our mind, think about it, and try and see also that it's reality that things change, it doesn't help so much. I mean, there's this really dumb example. I don't know if you've heard this story. It sounds such a cute story, but it's got some profound meaning, you know. At the time of the Buddha, this mother whose baby had died, she was beyond grief. You can only imagine the grief. And she'd heard about this clever guy called Buddha. So naturally you hope, oh God, maybe he'll bring her back to life, you know. So he went to her, and she went to the Buddha. This is a dumb story, but hear the point. And she all, because of the attachment and the connection with her baby was so unbearable, people go mad. I mean, people go mad when this happens. We see it. It was the depth of the connection and the attachment as well, which is normal human behaviour. So he could see her mind was so out of beyond bearing. He said to her, because she said, can you bring my baby back to life? He said, and then he could see her mind. So he said, and it sounds so cute, you know, but he said, oh, of course I will. But on condition that you find me a mustard seed from a house where no one ever died. I mean, it's such a dumb story, but you hear the point. She went from house to house, and she got the realization that everybody dies. Impermanence. You understand? And I mean, I know it sounds so simple, but it's quite profound to realize that. So when you see, one thing the Buddha's saying too is, we have all these assumptions. So I think we have the assumption that something shouldn't change. But that's just not valid. And that's why we suffer so terribly. Part of the reason we suffer is because we think it's wrong that a person dies. Do you understand my point? He's fine. He's allowed to weep. You weep, sweetheart. It's all right. You can even weep out loud if you want to. But we all understand, you know. So it's just slowly working on yourself. Slowly, it will heal. But just take care of yourself. Have good friends. Have a little weep. But it's learning to be realistic. In a way, it's learning to be realistic, which sort of sounds very brutal, but it really is true. Because the more, I remember one person I met whose wife had died, and he was utterly, profoundly, utterly connected to her. He was like 10 years later, still like a half a person, beyond grief, because he couldn't change his mind, you know. He couldn't accept the reality. So that's what attachment is so intense in us that, like that, the mother, we can't see the truth. Like if I'm in a relationship and everybody in the whole world sees that he's cheating on me, but I'm the only one who can't. because I'm completely living in a fantasy world. That's what attachment causes us to do. And it's unbearable when reality comes and hits us in the face, you know. So just be brave, sweetheart. Look after yourself and have good friends and nurture your heart. Do you understand? It doesn't go overnight, sweetheart. Yes.
Thank you.
All right. What else, people? Any other questions? Yes.
Has Buddhism been proven?
That's a good, perfect question, sweetheart. Okay, has relativity been proven? It's one of those findings of this clever scientist called Einstein. Well, we have to assume it has. And the first person who okay, this is a really good question, so let's think it through. So there's a guy called Einstein, this clever scientist, and he talked about I think he talked about a thing called relativity, some big finding back, wasn't it? At the time of some clever scientist guy, and he presented his findings. Okay, so basically what he said was, I have found this particular concept to be true. So he presents his findings. Now that's what we call science. Would you agree? Would you agree with that? We call that science, don't we? So nobody else in the audience has proved it yet, have they? Have they? Well, because he's the one who came up with it. You understand my point? So that's called science. So because we know it's science and nobody's ever heard it before, then the first thing we would not say, oh, don't be ridiculous, what are you talking about? We'd go, that's interesting, and then basically Einstein would say, here is my methods. Wouldn't he say that? And now it's over to you to prove it. Would you agree with that? Would you agree with that? So then, okay, so in the world, we tend to say, oh, relativity, oh, Einstein proved it, other people have proved it, so my question to you is, have you proved it? I'm not trying to be tricky. I'm getting to a certain point. So have you ever proved a thing called relativity?
No.
So relativity, I can say to you, based on what I've read, some people have proved it. So that means it is scientifically proven to be true by some people. But what our trouble in the world is, we then go, oh, it's true, but who is it true for? That's a literal question. Who is something true for? Who? I'm asking you. The person who's proved it, isn't it? Are you following my thinking here? I'm getting to answer your question. But can you hear my thinking? Are you hearing what I'm saying, or are you getting a bit confused?
I'm getting a bit confused.
Okay, darling, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to confuse you. I'm so sorry. I'm trying to answer your question by
It's
asking.
only true for people who...
Anything is only true for somebody who's proven it. Would you agree with that?
Or believed in it, though, right?
No, that's not proof. No. That's my point. That's a great point you made. Listen to this. Listen, darling. You can say, I believe in that 1 + 1 is 2. You could say that, couldn't you? But what if you can't? What if you haven't proven it? Because you haven't worked it, you haven't gone home with your sums and proven it to be true. So what's the point of believing in it? How can that help you to believe in it? How can it help you just to believe in something? How can that help? Can you hear the point of my question or not? Nobody would say they believe in mathematics, would they? But okay, I think what's happening here is you're using a different definition of belief. You believe in it because you proved it. Yeah? Sweetheart, I wish you'd answer me. Have you...
Basics.
What?
I feel like I've proven very basic.
No, good, no, there you go. No, that's right. You have. No, this is my point. So what you've proven is what you can say is true, isn't it? So then you could also say, I believe in it. But you're not believing in it, I mean by that is you believe it because you've proven it. But the rest of it you haven't proven, have you?
No.
So then you can't really say it's true for you, can you?
No.
But you know it's true for other people. But there's a big difference, isn't it? So the Buddha's point is, all I'm getting at is the same. But as soon as we get to religion, we don't talk like this. So the Buddha comes along and he says, this is what I've proven to be true. He, in his own experience, from his own mind, has come up with the concept that the mind is not physical, that reincarnation, karma, all these views about the Buddha's philosophical presentation of the world, they're not coming from on high. That's my point in the beginning. They're not coming from revelation. They're not, therefore, were you brought up a Christian?
Not really.
Okay. Well, you know the Christian concept that God made the world, God made me, and you believe in it. But nobody's proven that, have they?
No.
So that's right, but they believe without proof. And that's okay, it's fine, you can do that. But the Buddhist proof concept is he's not a creator. He doesn't talk about a creator. He says we don't need creating. And he's telling us his experiential findings is your mind is not physical, it comes from a previous life, everything you do, you create your own experiences. So your question is, has anybody proven that? Yes, the Buddha. and lots of other people who since then have taken his methods and have proved it to themselves. For me, that's why I like to say this is my working hypothesis. I haven't proved this stuff yet experientially, but I'm working with it hypothetically. I'm working with it theoretically. That for me is the way to say it when I say I'm a Buddhist. So are we communicating now?
Yes.
So I would say yes, lots of people have. But the Western world, the materialist world, because it doesn't agree with those concepts, just says, don't be ridiculous. So it's very arrogant, really. And that's why it's really actually fantastic. The last 30 years or something, the Dalai Lama has been having all these conferences with these great scientists, and they're finding ways to bring together these two seemingly opposite views. And I think it's fantastic that people are being civilized and talking about these things, not just dismissing it as arrogant, with an arrogant kind of mind. So it's a great question. Yes, but the Buddha would say, the Buddha's point is, this is what he's proven. This is his whole point. Because where else would you get your information from? It's a good question. Are you seeing what I'm saying? Where else do you get the information from? You either believe someone else it says, or you do it yourself. There's only two options. Well, the Buddha's view is, that's why he doesn't talk about a creator. That's why he's not a creator. And that's why he says everything he's saying is what he himself has proven. So all I'm doing as a Buddhist is attempting to do that slowly, slowly. You understand what I'm trying to say? That's the approach in Buddhism. Does that make sense?
It does.
It's a really good question you made. It's a brilliant question, actually. Thank you. Okay, what else, people? Any other questions? Yes.
You started to talk about the subconscious.
Yes.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about that and what the Buddha said about it.
Okay, absolutely, yeah. Well, first of all, look at what we even mean by conscious, at a conscious level. I mean, people talk about not remembering a past life, don't they? Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but do you remember 100% of today? I don't think so. I think if you started to have to write down every moment of today accurately, we'd be every one of us a total miserable failure. So the Buddha's point about the grosser level of consciousness, which is conceptuality, which is all we know, it doesn't have the capacity to remember. And I think if we start having memories of our childhood, I start talking to my sisters, every one of us has a different interpretation of that event. So even when we do remember, it's going to be coloured by certain other things. So we just think it's normal, isn't it, not to remember many things.
Yeah.
Well, the Buddhist idea is that everything we've ever seen and touched and heard and said, he's talking about past lives as well, like I said, that Lama said, you're like shooting a movie all day. You don't remember most of it, but it's all gone in. It's like in your memory bank. It's all there. And the Buddhist idea is, as you get this single point of concentration, the Hindus came up with this, as you get this single point of concentration, this incredible capacity that enables you to go beyond the grosser conceptual level and beyond the sensory, which of course we think is mystical, but it demands very much skill and a long time. Then you literally access your more subtle level of mind. And you literally access your memories and you remember and you see the past, you see the future. This idea of clairvoyance in Buddhism is a completely natural state of mind that everybody can access when you go beyond the grosser level. Lots of people have flashes of moments of memories of things. We all know that. People in their dreams have flashes. But because we live at this grosser level, we just don't have the skill, but we can learn that skill, this technique that these Indians have created thousands of years ago.
And how does that serve someone to tap into?
Perfect. Okay. First, thank you. There's two things about the subconscious. One is the ability to see the past, but that doesn't necessarily serve any benefit whatsoever. That's a really good point, thank you. But the other part is this. The other skill that comes is the ability, and this is where I've got to try and explain the mind now. Okay. So right now we agree we're mostly on autopilot, aren't we? We learn things and we do it very quickly. So since we're children, we've really got certain habits. I remember since a tiny girl, my mother didn't have to teach me to be angry. I was really good at it. You understand my point? So that's why we say, oh, that's just natural. Just born that way, Robina's angry, In other words, so the Buddhist view of anger is the response when my attachment, this little girl in here, doesn't get what she wants. Basically speaking simply, the Buddhist view of attachment is very sophisticated, but we'll go into it in more detail. It's this deep craving in us, this deep feeling. These two states of mind for the Buddha are really fundamental, okay? Okay, I'm trying to get your point. So this constant hunger, it's like an emotional hunger to always get what I want every second. It's very natural. We can see it in evidence in our daily lives, It's deep inside us, and that's why we all think it's natural. But we can see that when it really is tested, it becomes very neurotic. We freak out. We don't get what we want. That's why we have mental breakdowns. That's why we weep and cry when people die on us, because this attachment is so deeply inside us. And Buddha says it's very deep, instinctively, profoundly deep, and natural. But we can learn to change it. So what I'm saying is we're born. The Buddha says we're born. At the first second of conception, in fact, we come into this life programmed with our own tendencies, our own habits, from practicing before. Just take this as a hypothesis, okay? So we look at the Hitlers of the world, or the Mother Teresas.
Right.
In a sense, we can see that they're almost born like that. Okay, the West tries to find what their mummy did to them when they're little girls and boys to see why they turned into a murderer of 6 million people. I mean, it's a bit of a big ask, I think, but never mind. Or why suddenly Mother Teresa became a saint, you know? But basically, Buddha says we become programmed with our own stuff. Disappearing. It's a no battery.
I put new ones in. I think it's
Oh,
the
you did?
cord. Yeah, it's the cord.
Oh, is it when we need a new cord then, don't we? Or I just have to shout. Okay. So basically we're pretty much programmed. So in my case, with lots of attachment to get what I want, and then lots of volatile anger when I didn't, and then jealousy, like all of us, variations of these are very ancient habits inside us, he says. And what I'm getting at is this. The only time I knew I was angry, or anybody else did, was when I'm shouting and yelling, tears are coming, words are vomiting out my mouth. Oh, Robina's angry. So that's the tip of the iceberg, basically. But that's when we realise. So when my body's involved and the words are shouting out my mouth, then we realise there's anger there. And that's what we call feelings and emotions, isn't it? But for the Buddha, that's the tip of the iceberg. That when with meditation, with concentration meditation, and you learn to focus the mind, and you go beyond gradually, even slightly, beyond the physical and the emotional, the conceptual, you start to listen to these thousands of stories that are all racing on underneath, that are the stories about anger, meaning the conceptual story. Anger says, how dare you do that to me? I don't deserve it. It's actually a conceptual story, but deeply ingrained in me, totally programmed. So the second as a little girl I didn't get what I wanted, I was perfect at anger. So when we start to unpack and unravel our mind beyond the emotional component, we're going to hear these thousands of conceptual stories and start to unpack and unravel them and to deconstruct them. That's what being a Buddhist is. That's the benefit of getting slightly deeper into your mind. Forget the memory part. There's these two aspects, but there's to hear all those... Like if you tried to even transcribe all those thousands of thoughts you have while you're raging on at night, you can't sleep. But we really shouldn't... We could be forgiven for thinking we're all mentally ill when you see these chaotic thoughts, isn't it? But they are chaotic, aren't they? There's no logic, there's no full stops, there's no commas, there's no editing. It's just nightmarish, berserk thoughts. And we think it's normal. But the Buddha says it's mental illness, and we can learn to get deeper and then begin to unpack and unravel and make sense of all these thoughts, and then to reconfigure them and start to argue with the angry, crazy thoughts before they get to the mouth. That's the benefit. That's the point. That's really being Buddhist practice. It's like being a cognitive therapist.
Yeah, that's powerful.
That's at a subtle level. That's real practice.
So I only know 2 types of meditation.
Yeah.
Vipassana and loving kindness.
That's right, it's perfect.
Gotcha.
Perfect, darling, perfect. So Vipassana is based upon the first one, which is concentration.
Right.
So there's 2 modes in Buddhism, and there's 2 examples. And there's thousands of techniques, but there's 2 main kinds. One kind is this one that's called concentration. And then on the basis of that, you do the scanning of the physical experiences and things. That's Vipassana, isn't it? But the concentration is simply bare bones learning to concentrate. And we'll do it and we'll talk about it, you know.
Cool.
And then on the basis of that, you're stepping out of your head for 5 minutes. So at least you can begin to hear the chaos. So this is where part of the problem is, okay. In the world, I think there's quite a few misconceptions about, certainly about Buddhist meditation. People can make up whatever they like. No, he doesn't own the word meditation. But really, one of the misconceptions about meditation is, it's unfortunate, but we think it's an alternative to a pill. In other words, when I'm full of anger, when I'm having a real problem, want to kill my boyfriend, then I think, oh, I better meditate. Well, it's a bit like, you know, what's this gentleman's name? Stu. Stew, is it? Or stew if you're Australian, okay? Stew, okay. So listen, if he's my boyfriend, if we're in love and everything's perfect, and then you say, you know, you guys should learn to meditate, I'll say, what are you talking about? We're happy. So we really do believe it's only when you have a problem that we meditate, isn't it? You understand?
Yeah.
But the Buddha's view is we've all got to work on to know our mind. We've all got to know our mind well. We've all got to learn to unpack and unravel what's going on so that we can literally deal with the problems when they arise before they vomit out the mouth. Or before you can't get out of bed one morning because you're inert with depression. So in other words, our big problem is we only notice the problems when they get to the surface. So it's a bit, for me, I use the analogy, it's a bit like, you're driving at 100 miles an hour on the freeway and suddenly you notice your wheels are falling off. So imagine waiting till then before you go to a mechanic. We'd be in serious trouble, wouldn't we?
Right.
And you don't hear of wheels falling off because we know we have mechanics. So, but we don't have any maintenance for the mind. I know it sounds cute, but it's profoundly true. We only wait till the wheels fall off. We only wait till we're having the problem in the relationship, to going crazy, getting depressed. Then we realise we've got a problem, but it's a bit like trying to imagine what you'd do if your wheels are falling off. Damage control is the best you can expect. It's way too late to say you've got a problem. So that's why when we understand, even though we're having a lovely time in our relationship, still there's lots of stuff in there, all our old habits, and we have to learn to reconfigure and work with those. That's day-to-day practice. And even without being highly realised, even without getting single point of concentration, being a highly realised being with clairvoyance, forget that. Even that, with some semblance of day-to-day practice, even just a bit of focus, but also knowing how to deal with what arises, and we're going to talk about this. You could stay stable throughout your life. No matter what problem comes, you're able to figure it, work it out, and deal with it. But now we're like little babies going up and down like yo-yos, like children, because we haven't ever looked at the mind. So it's so practical.
Absolutely.
That's the day-to-day practical benefit of doing a focusing meditation. But the other misconception about mindfulness, because we wait till the problem comes and because we know the pain is unbearable, then we think that meditation is to make it go away. So we think the purpose is to stop all the thoughts. And that's a bit like you've got cancer as well as pain, and someone gives you a painkiller and now you think you've solved the problem. You've just solved the superficial problem. So that not only... it would be a bonus if we sat down to concentrate for 5 minutes and our mind calmed down. It doesn't always happen, but it's nice if it does. But that's just superficial. What we really got to learn to do is be able to bring to bear in our daily life that ability to be noticing the thoughts while we're also driving the car, having the discussion with the husband. But right now we're so absorbed in the object we don't notice what's happening here. So when we learn that skill, then we can deal with this as well as deal with the traffic. And that's just intelligence. And you've got to catch the thoughts before they get to the emotional level. And that, if we did that even a little bit, we'd be far happier, more stable, more intelligent, grown-up, self-respectful people.
Sure.
You understand?
Work better together, too.
Darling, this is the point, And this is why this has got zero to do with so-called religion. This has got zero to do with so-called belief, in the sense of believing something. You understand what I'm saying? This is just practical. And if you never did more than this, it's profound,
Mm-hmm.
And this is the day-to-day application of Buddhist skill. But the trouble is, because Buddhism is taught by the Tibetans and by the Asians, it just sounds like some weird other culture,
Yeah.
And it's hard to hear it in down-to-earth words. It's so
It's
important.
hard. You do a fine job of bridging the gap.
That's so important for me to do that.
Yeah, because the words are even hard to read.
Precisely, darling. I
And
know
say.
that. Exactly. That's exactly right. I know. And then because of that, we go, oh, this is religion over here. This is life over here. It's demented, If this is not about life, I don't know what the hell it's all about. I'm not interested. You understand?
Yeah.
I'm not interested if it's about something else. Isn't it?
Thank you.
Good, darling. Happy. Pleasure. What else? Questions? What, darling?
How do you build up the courage to get out of victim mode?
Oh, darling, that's just slowly, isn't it? How do you build up the courage to stop being a victim? Honey, this is just part of the process, Just begin. You got to start somewhere, and I think even start. If you've got low self-esteem and you just believe you can't play tennis, what's the first step? Maybe it's possible I could play tennis. Well, the first step here is maybe it's possible I can learn to know my own mind and become accountable. That's the long-term goal, but you've got to start with the thought first. So if you even know it's possible, that's a good, and I mean it sincerely, that's a big, powerful first step. But part of the problem is, when we think, oh wow, I can play tennis because you go watch Federer, and then you're disappointed because you can't play like Federer overnight. So the number of people I've heard who say, oh, I tried to meditate yesterday and it didn't work. That's a bit like saying, I tried to play tennis and it didn't work. It's a bit hilarious. So you've got to have the confidence that you can, and then you've got to have the hard work. And not expect results overnight. That's part of our problem. We want a quick fix, So and that means and that's why, it's interesting. This single point of concentration meditation technique, created by these Indians 3,000 years ago, I keep telling you, not by the hippies in the 1960s or something, is they say in the text where it's described in 9 stages, it's described in terms of 9 stages of cultivation. So they all say, even in the text, that a sign of success at the first of the 9 stages is you think your mind's getting worse. So if you go to the gym, you go to the gym to look like, you know, some gorgeous person, right? That's the end result, and you get excited. But you go to the gym the first day, you come back with such pain you can't believe it, right? And you've discovered muscles you never knew you had. But my point is this, you don't get depressed about that pain. You know it's a good sign, don't you? Because in other words, you're seeing your body like you didn't know before. So with your mind, because these old habits are so deep, because we've never paid attention to them, because we've always blamed everybody else. So when we start to take responsibility, as soon as you start even saying, I want to see what's going on in my mind, you start to notice your thoughts, naturally you think you're getting worse. So you've got to have the courage to know it's hard work, and you have to have the courage to want, not to make all the thoughts go away, but to be able to see them, because that's what you've got to work with. So if you can't recognize the attachment voice, the jealous voice, the angry voice, the action voice, the victim voice, from the love and the kindness and the intelligence voice, they're all together in a big soup right now. If you can't hear the different ones and then have this inner discussion with yourself, then you how can you fix it? It's not going to go away. But you have to have courage to want to see your mind. That means to deal with the problems and to welcome them. Do you understand that point? That's part of the process, darling. That's how you do it. With courage. And no matter how bad it is, be happy to find the next level of attack, anger and jealousy and misery. Wow, I'm so happy. I'm really that's the big shift we have to make. Because the commonest thing I hear from people who've been practicing for a while, oh, I'm still so jealous, oh, I still get angry so easily, and you beat yourself up. This is, you'll never change until the cows come home if you talk that way. Because we've got to change the whole, so when you go to the gym, or when you start to get fit, you want to discover the muscles that need work. You've got to discover the one you've got to do this for and that for. You just don't want to go, oh, I'm so bad, I'm so ugly. You want to discover what the problems are so you can work on them. So it means becoming familiar with your mind, but owning what's there and being happy. But the key point is, and this is the same for this sweetheart. What's your name, darling? Brian. Same point for Brian, but different scenario. When things are despairing, when things are miserable, when we think we're a disaster, when we're grief-stricken, in the same way, when everything's perfect, we can't bear the thought that it will change, so we don't believe it'll change. Now when we fall crashing down, when the bad things come, we don't believe they'll change either. And that's not true. And that's why we're so terrified of seeing our minds, because we think, I'm bad forever, I'm guilty forever, I'm grief-stricken forever. It's not true. So when you know it's not permanent, you know this junk in you is not at the core of your being, when you know it does not define you, even though it's very strong, you'll have more courage to face it. Do you understand? I mean, that's why we kill ourselves, because we think, you know, I always use the example of Nicole Kidman, and I love Nicole Kidman, I'm trying to be mean about her. When she was still with Tom Cruise, I read an interview in Vanity Fair years ago, when she was still with Tom Cruise. And she said at the end of the interview, we will be together until we're 80. So it's very powerful. That's when everything's going beautiful with me and Stu. You know, because attachment is getting what it wants, and he adores me and I adore him, because we can't bear the thought, and it's so instinctive, we would never want it to end. We do not want, so we can't bear to think it will end. Of course it will end. This is the nature of the universe, but because we can't bear the thought that it will end, we live in denial. So she said, we will be together until we're 80, because it's beautiful now, she assumed it'll be beautiful until they're 80. So that's why it's so shattering when he did leave her, for Penelope Cruz, isn't it? He did. I read the news. You're following me? So then the tragedy is, in the same way that she really believed everything was perfect and will last forever, when the bubble burst and she went down to despair, now she couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. And that's when you want to kill yourself. Understand what I'm saying? But it will change. Everything changes. It's just inevitable. So we can just ride the waves instead of resisting. That's part of the pain, you know. And not being scared. And sometimes what happens when people die or people leave us, we almost feel guilty not feeling bad. We almost feel guilty by getting better and falling in love with someone else. It's almost unbearable to us to think about it. But we shouldn't. It's just the way life is, you know. So, but it's not your scenario, but you understand what I'm saying, though. Whatever it is you see in you, the key thing where we make the shift is where you greet it and don't get freaked out about it. This is the big change we have to make. Are you understanding that point?
Yes.
Good. I'm happy. What else, people? What time are we supposed to finish? Now. It's 9 o'clock. Yes, darling. Yes.
Hi.
Hello, darling.
I related a lot to this gentleman over here. So,
Yes.
my partner of 5 years left me
Yes.
3 months ago out of nowhere.
That's it.
And it's devastating.
Yes, exactly.
So, and I relate a lot to the attachment.
Yes.
And how that's probably, that's what's going on.
Yes,
And,
exactly.
So two things. One is it possible to be in a relationship
Without attachment. I understand.
And also, how to, like, I have this hope that she's gonna get better and
Yes.
she's gonna come back.
And of course you do. Of course you do, darling. Of course, every part of your being is dying for that. Of course
so,
you do.
yeah. So, and she has a lot of dysfunction.
Yes, yes, yes.
So,
Sure.
so I'm hoping for
Uh-huh.
something to work out.
I understand,
But it's
darling.
dangerous.
I understand it is. It
And I'm
is.
just trying to walk that road.
Exactly, darling.
Of hope, but
Yes, exactly.
also not
Being
grasping
accepting
at
reality.
it. Yeah.
So, first of all, okay, that's it. The second point first. It's kind of interesting. The way Buddhism talks about karma, I don't know if you relate to karma at all. That means you've got this strong history already. That's how come you even bumped into each other, right? So, the Buddhist idea is if there is, it's sort of, and or we can all see that certain things have a life. Relationships have a life, as much as we don't like it. But and yours, in fact, ran out after 3 years. Let's say 4, 5, 5 years. Okay, 5 years. Let's just say something has shifted after 5 years. Okay. So put it this way: if there is still gas in that tank, meaning there's still karma between you, you can guarantee you'll continue to be together. But honey, if there's no gas left, no matter how hard you want it, it will never happen. So the better thing to ask, to say to yourself as a hopeful thought, not hopeful, but practical, is if there is still benefit for us to be together, may it happen. But you've got to recognize at the same time, because this is what's painful about recognizing, like that mother with the baby, she's so distraught she could not bear the reality the baby was dead. And that's exactly how attachment works. You can't bear the pain of actually thinking that's the end. And that's where, so in a way, we've got to have the courage, if you can, to say those words to yourself. She might never come back. But you also say, but if there is benefit and if the karma's still there, it'll happen whether I like it or not. But of course it's painful. You're hitting on the head. It's ugly perfect, darling. It's unbearable because we can't stand the pain of not getting that thing that we want. That is the pain of attachment. So we know it. Be brave with it. But the other part is this. And this is just all intellectual stuff for us, but it's this analysis, you know. The attachment is actually the symptom of a half a person. We are all like half people walking around. We even talk about another half, don't we? We even say, oh, he's my other half. That's how we even talk. The Buddha's view is about attachment. It's the symptom of a very deeply suffering person. And join the universe, baby, we've all got it. So our logic is we always want something. There's something there that when I get it, it'll somehow make me whole. So logically, the Buddha's view is, logically, the Buddha's view is everything that you are is in you, sweetheart. Everything of you. You have the potential in you this second to be utterly complete, utterly full, utterly blissful, utterly content, utterly loving and kind and wise and intelligent. That's Buddha's deal. And that's who we really are. So knowing that, it's very powerful. And it's okay to still have relationships. But so the first question, until you're highly realised, baby, forget about having no attachment. Just, you learn to live with it. You learn to work with it. And that's part of the practice. You learn to know that that's what we've got, this needy part of us that believes I'm nothing unless I've got her. We know that's like that. We've all got it. Join the universe. But it's not valid. It's a nonsense story we've made up, and it's a very deep story we believe in totally. So knowing in reality that you are everything already inside you, this is a powerful concept. And that doesn't mean you don't have relationships, because the real way to use relationships, instead of like a little vampire, I'm not saying you're like a little vampire, but like attachment's like a little vampire, it's always trying to suck the thing out of the other person. And you see it in some relationships, right? Whereas if you have a relationship and it's still based on attachment, you'll have joy together, but you use the love you get from this other person, not just to feed you like a vampire, but as nourishment for your little heart, to help you grow in yourself as a person. So that's a good relationship. You use each other in a good way to become better human beings. For when one of you dies or leaves first, because that's always going to happen. It's not being brutal, it's being realistic. But remember that attachment is a symptom of half a person. We've all got it. And that's the pain of it. Suffering doesn't come from love, compassion, or even joy and happiness. Pain comes from this little needy girl inside us. We've all got it, darling. Do you understand it? And so just know that that's not who you really are. You are everything you already are, right even now. And then when you do have another relationship, again back with her or someone else, you'll be a more worthwhile person to have a good relationship. Put it that way. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Good, darling. Yes.
So, attachment can be from attaching to a job.
Anything at all. Attachment is limitless in finding anything to glom onto.
I mean, if someone passes away,
Yeah.
you're attached to that.
Of course you are.
That pet or
That's why you're sad. That's why you suffer.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, okay, it's not just the only reason. That's why I said grief has got more than just attachment. It's also, I mean, the Dalai Lama, who said to me, a guy who's done this job we're talking about, right? He's a funny, wonderful human being who cracks jokes about his enemies and they've destroyed Tibet and everything. He's not suffering. He doesn't have attachment. He doesn't have anger, they would say. But he still cries when he talks about his mum. But it's not out of the broken-hearted grief that we have and the panic. It's just out of compassion for this wonderful human being. So having tears and sad doesn't mean it's necessarily suffering. It doesn't mean it's coming from attachment. Attachment is when it's I-based, fear, grief, loss, panic, you know.
So if you let go of attachment, does that mean you let go of love?
No, on the contrary. That's the whole point. That's where you chuck the baby out of the bathwater. And that's our problem now. When we have my relationship with Stu, let's say, in normal lives, like her with her friend, we can't distinguish between attachment and love. So love is under the second heading, the positive qualities. Love, if you look at love, when it's in our own selves, we've got it. It's this empathetic, it's this altruistic delight in someone else's happiness. Now we have that for our beloved. We have that for our poodle and our baby. But we confuse that. We don't realise it's also completely polluted by attachment. So attachment, if I have raw attachment for a Stu, it would just be raging, it would be manipulative and possessive and really like, you see some people who are really needy, that would be revolting to see. If I have pure love for Stu, that would be completely selfless. But we don't have one or the other like that. It's not as if we have pure attachment and pure love. They're mixed together and that's why they're hard to discriminate. That's why they're really hard to distinguish between them. And that's the job of knowing our own minds well. So we can see all the tricky bits, you know, and distinguish the crazy conceptual stories from the valid ones. And that's when you get more brave about knowing what to do, and that's when you become more brave as a less victim, and that's when you give up the business, you know. It's this ability to distinguish what is in this big emotion soup, what the hell is going on.
There's a lot of self-study there.
Oh, sweetheart, you just hit it on the head. That's literally what it is. Being your own therapist, as Lummy actually calls it being your own therapist. And this is why in our culture, if you think about a person going up to the mountains for 3 years meditating, we're just confused. They seem like the most autistic, bizarre person you could ever meet. We have no comprehension of what the name of God a person would do in a cave on their own for 3 years, right? Because we are so addicted to being social beings that we don't, in our culture, I think, we can't conceive of a person being on their own and becoming a whole person. It just seems contradictory to us. So our psychology is so different. Whereas the Buddha's one is this astonishing understanding of the stuff that goes on in here, and that to really do this job seriously, the best is to go off for a couple of years, if you've got to be highly qualified to do that, because most of it go nuts. So that it's unbelievable. But it's not just watching your navel, it's not just being self-centered, it's unbelievable unpacking and unravelling and radically reconfiguring the very way our mind works. So you come out this marvellous, content, wise, compassionate, gorgeous person who has so much love, and you'd have much better sex if you didn't have attachment. That's the irony. Because you're not needy and worried, you know, you're just full of joy and love and bliss. Do you understand? Literally. Do you understand?
I do.
See, the other obstacle, it's time to go home. We'll talk more about we've got several days to go. And given, as I always quote, I know it's so stupid, but I talk three times the pace of everybody else. They've proven it. These nuns in Brisbane, at our centre in Brisbane, I always quote this. She invited us, the centre in Brisbane, they invited 3 of us nuns to give 3 Wednesdays. They were all 90 minutes, and they transcribed them. and the other 2 nuns were 8 pages, and mine were 24. So it really is actually 3 in the morning. No, 2 hours. 6, so it's 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. No, it's 1 in the morning already. Okay. So we should stop. I think we better stop, okay? What's our program tomorrow? We've got every day, haven't we?
What's the root of my problem?
Blimey. So we've got tomorrow. What's the topic tomorrow?
What is the root of my problem?
Oh, well, there we go. Here we go. We're going to go into the delusions now. And we're going to rub our faces in the delusions, okay? Okay. You guys, I'm very happy. Thank you so much. That'll do. So we think, if there's anything useful this last 6 hours, any useful tools we can use to help us see our own minds, develop our qualities, have courage, all these things, how fantastic. And remember that nothing goes astray. So this, 2 hours of talking, all these thoughts, as many thoughts as we've had, they've all left these seeds. So it's all gone in there. It's all gone in there for us to access, So how fantastic. So we delight that these seeds we planted, may they be nourished, so they grow in the future, in the development of our amazing potential, for our sake and the sake of others. I'll just sing a couple of Tibetan prayers that sort of express that, okay? Kewaji Jududar Lama Sangye Drugyune Drowa Chikyang Malupar Dei Sala Gopasho Jamchub Semchog Rinpoche Ke Panam Ke Gyuchi Ke Banyam